Hello, I'm the awesome tutor, and we're back again with this exam paper, only this time we're going to look at part B. Now for 25 markers, you want to make a plan. As you can see, I did a little plan here. This was my mock, by the way. So I have my factors here already thought out. Competitive exports, using China as an example to back it up. Cost push inflation, and FDI. So the question is, to what extent might the depreciation in Mexico's currency improve its economic performance? Now, it talks about Mexico's currency. So always in your answer, you need to relate it back to Mexico. Okay? Even if you're using other countries as an example, like China, use that to back up your analysis of the effect on Mexico's economic performance. And with questions that relate to this bit of context here, make sure you read the context, because this will likely be very important to use in your answer. So in 2016, the US president promised to impose tariffs on imports of Mexico's manufactured goods. This led to uncertainty, resulting in a 20% fall in the value of the Mexico's currency, the peso. Okay? Let's start. Again, little mini introduction, usually defining the key terms. A depreciation in a currency is a decrease in its value compared to another currency, and this has many implications on a country's economic performance. One effect of a 20% depreciation in Mexico's currency. See here, I'm quoting the context that was given in the question. So it just shows the examiner that you are focused on Mexico in your answer. One effect of a 20% depreciation in Mexico's currency is its exports will become more price competitive. This is because the depreciation in Mexico's currency will cause export prices to decrease and import prices to increase. The reduction in export prices will likely generate more demand for exports, because if the price of a good or service goes down, if the good or service is elastic in demand, a decrease in price will lead to a more than proportionate increase in demand. So demand will go up, revenue will go up, the value of exports will go up. So your exports are more price competitive if there's a depreciation in your currency. This will be highly beneficial for Mexico, again relating it back to Mexico, and an improvement in its economic performance. So you're looking at advantages and disadvantages of a depreciation. Considering the threat from the US to impose tariffs. Again, quoting from that bit of context in the question, showing the examiner that you are focused on Mexico in your answer. Okay? As a result, net exports, X minus M, will increase, leading to a rise in aggregate demand. So you have your AS diagram here. Don't be afraid to use AS diagrams in A-level essays, because they're still relevant. Let me just go back to this quotation here. Why will it be highly beneficial for Mexico, considering the threat from the US to impose tariffs? If the US imposes tariffs on Mexico's exports, what that does, it will increase the price of Mexico's exports, because tariffs increase the price of the good or service coming into the country. So with Mexico's exports having an increase in price, they will become less competitive. But with a depreciation, export prices will become more price competitive, because their prices will decrease. Okay? Again, if you look at the context in the question here, the US has not imposed tariffs. Looking specifically in this bit of context, no matter whether they actually did or not in present time, what this says is the US promised to impose tariffs on imports. So according to this, they have not done that yet. It's just a threat that they will impose tariffs on imports. So, with exports being more price competitive, demand for exports goes up, net exports goes up, and that will lead to an increase in aggregate demand. This will lead to an increase in GDP from Y to Y1, so the diagrammatic analysis, generating economic growth. A prime example of this benefit is China. See, I'm using other application points in order to back up my analysis on Mexico, which has manipulated its currency to keep its value artificially low in order to increase the price competitiveness of its exports. China has definitely benefited from this, as its GDP growth rates were 2.6 to 2.9% between 2016 to 2018. Now, I'm pretty sure that I made these statistics up. I had the statistics written down somewhere in my notes, but during the exam, you're not going to remember everything you have. So as long as your statistics are realistic, the examiner is not going to go and check them. So you don't necessarily have to make all your statistics factual and accurate. In fact, you don't even need statistics in an essay. I don't even need this. I could just say that it benefited from higher growth rates. I don't need to use this to substantiate that claim. Thus, this further substantiates the likely improvement in Mexico's economic performance. So, with the example of China, with its low exchange rate for its currency, that has meant that China's exports are more price competitive, leading to economic growth. That increases the validity of my claim earlier, where I said that a depreciation in Mexico's currency will improve its economic performance, because they're similar examples, just different countries, with exactly the same analysis. However, as you can see from the diagram, prices may increase from P to P1. Okay? Causing demand pull inflation. This is a generic evaluation point from AS essays. I would avoid evaluation points like these because you can come up with better ones. This will likely lead to worsening inequality, particularly affecting the poor, as their nominal incomes are likely to remain the same, blah, 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 blah. Okay? It's not a really strong evaluation point. Furthermore, since a depreciation increases net exports, as previously explained, this will likely improve Mexico's economic performance by improving its trade balance. So not on the current account. So not only am I talking about the competitiveness of a country's exports and that leading to an increase in aggregate demand, I'm also relating that to another point, an improvement on the balance of payments, specifically the current account and the trade balance. Because with an increase in exports, so trade balance is the total value of exports minus the total value of imports. With an increase in exports, the trade balance will improve. This has many benefits. For example, it could lead to a current account surplus, whereby Mexico could increase its foreign currency reserves, which will be vital if the US does actually impose tariffs. Again, China has already benefited from its low value exchange rate, maintaining a largely consistent trade surplus for over a decade. So again, I'm using China as an example to back up my analysis on Mexico. China, consistent trade surplus for over a decade. Sorry, I can't really speak today for some reason. China has had a largely consistent trade surplus for over a decade. Main reason for that, in my opinion, is its low valued exchange rate, which makes its exports really price competitive. So what that does is it backs up my analysis on Mexico's trade balance improving as a result of its exports being more price competitive. Okay? It just adds value to your answer. However, of course, this may escalate tensions with the US over trade, as is already occurring with the current US-China trade war. Therefore, a depreciation in Mexico's currency may further incentivize the US to impose tariffs, distorting any advantage Mexico may gain from its price competitive exports. Now what I'm doing here is I'm again relating it to Mexico, and with this quotation here, I'm again relating it to that bit of context in the question. You see, it's really important, especially if when you're answering a question, it's asking you to specifically relate it to one country, in this case, Mexico. So again, I'm using China as well as an example to substantiate my analysis on Mexico. So in this evaluation point here, if Mexico's exports are price competitive, all right, the US is already threatening to impose tariffs, as said in the question. So if Mexico's exports are more price competitive, then that will further incentivize the US to impose tariffs, because Mexico will be gaining a trade advantage against the US. Okay? So if the US does impose tariffs, it will reduce the price competitiveness of Mexico's exports. So that depreciation, the advantages that come with that depreciation, will be distorted. Okay? This is a good evaluation point. It's applied, it's relevant, and it makes sense. Another likely improvement to Mexico's economic performance is it is now more attractive for foreign firms to set up operations there. This is because the depreciation in Mexico's currency will mean that it will be cheaper for TNCs to expand into the country. Okay, this is to do with the depreciation in the exchange rate. So if Mexico's currency has a low value compared to, say, the dollar will have a higher value than the Mexico currency. So what American-based TNCs can do is it will be cheaper for them to set up operations in Mexico, because they will need less dollars to buy the same amount of Mexico's currency. If you don't understand that, watch my previous video again and try to relate it to this example. This will increase FDI flows into Mexico, which will not only increase AD in the short term, but will also increase the productive capacity of Mexico's economy in the long term. So what I'm doing here is it's a sneaky evaluation point. Sneaky as in it's not explicit, it's implicit. I'm talking about short-term effects and long-term effects. So aggregate demand increases, that increases demand pull inflation, but with an increase in productive capacity, long-run aggregate supply also increases, and that leads to non-inflationary growth. Okay? So as you can see from the above diagram, this will not only substantially increase growth from Y to Y1 and increase employment, but the growth is also non-inflationary. This is a counter to my previous evaluation point here, talking about demand pull inflation. So this is highly beneficial to Mexico, as this will mean that in the long term, sustainable and stable economic development is likely to be achieved. Okay, so that's just analyzing the implications of growth, as shown in the diagram. However, there are also significant drawbacks to FDI, as it will increase foreign control over domestic assets, One need only look at Ecuador to substantiate this claim. So now I'm using Ecuador as an example to support my analysis on Mexico. 75% of Ecuador's oil revenues are sent back by TNCs to developed countries as profits are repatriated. 23% goes towards paying off its debt, and only 2% is invested into the Ecuador economy. Thus, an increase in FDI as a result of a currency depreciation may not actually improve Mexico's economic performance, as TNCs could exploit its assets. So with foreign direct investment, especially if it's to do with primary resources like oil, okay? Like with Ecuador here. FDI flows into the country. These TNCs have more control over oil exports from that country, and most of them repatriate their profits, so send back their profits to the country in which their operations are based. So in this case, 75% of those oil revenues are repatriated. Okay? And so what that does is it means less of those oil revenues are actually pumped into the Ecuadorian economy. So instead of profits being reinvested into these TNCs in Ecuador, they're sent back to the US, for example. That's not beneficial to the Ecuadorian economy, because this FDI is not relating to a direct positive impact into the Ecuador economy itself. 23% goes towards paying off debt. Okay, so only 2% of the benefits that come with FDI is actually impactful in the Ecuadorian economy itself. Okay? In conclusion, very good. Conclusions are very good, especially in 25 markers. They are essential. They're not just good, they're necessary. Okay? They help summarize your points, and it ends your essay with a boom. Okay? It helps the examiner a lot. A depreciation in Mexico's currency will likely improve its economic performance via more competitive trade and a better current account balance. However, certain trade-offs must be taken into account. In addition, in terms of FDI, the benefits associated with FDI largely depend on the negotiating power of the country with TNCs. So I am not only summarizing my analysis points, I'm summarizing my evaluation points. Okay, so it just tells the examiner, look, this is what I've done in this essay. I've used all these points, and I've used all these points. Clearly, that means you should give me a high mark. That's basically what conclusions are for. As you can see, this essay is level 5, primarily because it answers the question and it's focused on what the question is asking, the effect on Mexico's economic performance. And it also uses a lot of application points, because application points, they make your answer stand out. They are the difference between an A and an A star. Okay? And it's littered with evaluation. Not just evaluation at the end of the essay, but evaluation throughout. If you realize that with my essay, pretty much after every single point I make, I evaluate it. Okay? So, here, with the increase in AD, I evaluated it by talking about demand pull inflation. With this point, about the current account balance, I evaluated it by talking about increased tensions with the US. Another point, the FDI, I evaluated that by talking about the exploitation of domestic assets. So with each point that I made, I immediately evaluated it. And I think that's much better than leaving all your evaluation till the end. Okay, this is a much better structure. Anyway, that's all for this video. This has been the Awesome Tutor. Bye.